Hey everybody, it's Matt Smith, VP of Digital Sales Hacker. I'm super excited to be here with Ben Raffi of Grow Labs. And today we're going to talk about how to generate over $10 million in pipeline in 3 months. If your colleagues, your other sales hackers aren't around to watch this lecture or this webinar live today, they can check it out on Sales Hacker U. That's saleshacker/market. This webinar will be up within a few days of us completing it. And so, yeah, I just want to kind of introduce Ben. We're really excited. We're going to dive into a lot of different things about, ICPs, kind of how to build a list, and kind of very specific actionable tactics that Ben has kind of come up with in his 10 years of doing this stuff and kind of being on the front lines. So with that, I'd love to introduce Ben and have him show us a few things. What's up, Ben?
Yeah, Matt, thanks for having me. Cool. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining. As Matt said, you'll be able to see the recording online. Feel free to ask questions as well. Matt will be taking questions throughout the webinar. We want to make it as as convenient as possible for people to ask questions. We'll take some questions during the webinar and at the end as well. And I'll put my email at the end, so if you have other questions, feel free to shoot me an email. Great. So yeah, just before we get started, a little bit about me and my background. Originally from France, as you can probably tell. So starting from the bottom of this slide, I started my career in management consulting at the Boston Consulting Group. And about 7 years ago, I founded Universe. Universe is a ticketing app for event organizers. And I led the growth efforts globally. And that resulted in us acquiring 32,000 event organizers in less than 3 years. I ended up selling the business to Live Nation and Ticketmaster about 4 years ago, and I joined as VP of Growth there. And today I'm the growth advisor at several B2B companies here in the Bay Area, and I'm the CEO at Grow Labs. We are a B2B sales automation and lead generation platform. So today I really want to talk about how to generate leads and a pipeline for B2B sales. And that has allowed us at Grow Labs to generate about $35,000 of qualified ops per day per sales reps. And that total about $10 million of open ops in the past 3 months. So I split these sessions in 4 sections here. It's a lot to cover, so I'm going to try to move pretty fast. But again, feel free to ask questions. I want to make sure you guys get as much as possible from here. So first I want to talk about how to identify and segment your ideal customer profile, or ICPs. I call them micro segments. Then I'll talk about how to establish channels to acquire leads. And then we'll cover how to efficiently set up funnels into each channel. And finally, we'll cover how to measure, optimize, and scale your pipeline. So here's the framework that we built here internally at Grow Labs. It looks a little bit crazy, a little bit complex, but I swear as we go through the webinar, you'll understand all of the pieces. We'll cover each one by one. And the goal here is really for you to build your own flow, your own funnel that works for your business. So the first piece is to identify the most attractive markets and what I call the most attractive micro segments. What I realized when I started to advise and talk to a lot of B2B companies is that a lot of B2B companies lack a specific understanding of their clients and the specific needs of their clients. And this results in basically undefined marketing strategy, undefined market focus, and that is something you're going to end up spending a lot of money in the wrong areas. And so to effectively scale operation as you enter the growth stage, as you scale the business, you need to have a complete understanding of your customers, and you need to implement basically a dynamic customer segmentation strategy. And that's something that a lot of business kind of skip over, fail to really think about. Matt and I were actually talking about that just before this webinar, like how you get really excited, you start emailing tons of people, but you really don't focus on the right ones. So by implementing a customer segmentation strategy early, you can really focus on the clients that are worth your time.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to add there, Ben, I mean, I think that this is, everyone talks about list building, but they just don't go deep enough. They're really quick to kind of go for quantity and build a big, massive list, but they really don't think through, like you said, who's the right person, why are you emailing them, and really, really, really niche. And I think, Ben's going to nail that more, but that's a mistake I've seen people make time and again, where they're just constantly all about building the list and getting the emails out so quick. You're much better off to start slow, take a month and build the most amazing list and then prospect in that list versus taking a week to build a list and start prospecting as fast as possible. I've made the mistake so many times, and I see sales reps do this all the time. So yeah, I totally agree there, Ben.
Yeah, and I think, what's important is really to think about splitting your market in those very, very small audiences or ICPs, and the benefits of that are actually on this slide, but it's really about, if you split into different ICPs, you can actually, speak to them in the right language. Like every single, people you reach out to, they're going to feel more like, oh, that message is actually for me. Like, they work with like this specific niche or this specific market that I'm in. So you actually are able to both like, increase your conversion rates. You're also able to focus on, the clients that are going to make you the most amount of money. And then one very interesting aspect that you can see as well is that you start creating viral loops and viral like snowball effects. Because like if you're selling into a very small niche, you're effective in that niche, then customers are going to talk to other customers, competitors are going to notice that other competitors are using your product, and that's going to create your snowball effect. And if you start super, super large and target everyone out there, you won't be able to create those effects. And then finally, one thing that is really important is that you'll be able to iterate on your product, like give feedback to your product team, to your management team about like what are those specific clients asking, what are the features that you really need to be effective in those niches. At Universe, my past company, I think we had about 70 different verticals and niches that we were focused on. Obviously, over time, we saw maybe the top 5, then the top 25. So over time, we built that. At Grow Labs, right now, we have about 12 to 15 markets that we really focus on. So to start a segmentation strategy, these are the 3 major ways you can think about your segmentation. And so the first one, is called firmographic. It's a very simple approach. You can classify basically companies based on their industry, the company size, maybe their revenue. The problem with that is it's not typically the best approach, just because you won't be able to like basically the companies have the same criteria may not have the same needs. So the second approach in the middle column is what we call like needs-based approach. And that pretty much sums it all. It basically classifies people based on their needs, which is a better approach. But the one I would actually recommend for most B2B, SaaS-based or technology software is a value-based approach. And basically that splits your customers into what is the value you're going to bring to them. And that is what I would recommend, because it basically identifies the customers that are most likely to convert, because you're going to bring the most profit or most long-term benefits to them. And so the process to do a segmentation can be split into those 4 simple steps. The first one is to come up with hypothesis about, and you can start like high-level assumptions basically as to why those customers want to use your product, what are the benefits that they're going to get from it. Then the second step is you want to generate a list of data and insight, like from your CRM or from your existing platform, about who's using your platform, what are the criteria that they have in common. Once you have the data, the third step is to basically analyze the data and group those customers into ICPs or ideal customer profiles. Here again, the goal is to find criteria that senses those groups. So a good example here that we have at Grow Labs is marketplaces. So we have marketplaces clients, and we realize that marketplaces that have a high traffic, so maybe the Alexa rank is a low score. They have significant funding, maybe between $5 to $50 million, and they use Stripe as their merchant account. So those again are different criteria, and based on that, we can actually target those people and have very, very customized messaging. So, you know, like if we know that they use Stripe, we can actually use that when we email them. Say like, hey, we have other clients that are similar to you that have used Stripe and that use our product to do, you know, X, Y, Z that you guys are doing. So again, very, very, very important to do that. And the last step is to evaluate the attractiveness of each segment. So the goal is really you want to develop a formula. And so, you know, the type of criteria that we include here could be like the size of the segments, obviously, like how many companies that you can go after, what is the profit per company, what is the likelihood to convert, so that might require, you know, competitive analysis. And then one that I really, really like to evaluate the attractiveness is the targetability. And so what I mean by that is like how easy is it to identify those customers? How easy is it to build a list about these companies? And that is a big criteria, because if you're not able to find those companies, if you're not able to identify them, or if it's really expensive or very time consuming, that will play into how attractive this segment is. Does that make sense? Matt, do we have any questions or anything on this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think, you know, being able to pull by technology is massive, right? If you have a Salesforce app, you know, being able to, you know, figure out who uses Salesforce and be able to kind of sell into that is really interesting. And then, like you said, I think layering it, right? Being like, they use Salesforce and this technology, then you can really get very specific on the outbound. And also, like, I think thinking through, I think you're doing it smart, because you're thinking several steps ahead. When I do email them, they're going to be interested and intrigued because I've kind of done my background research. And then maybe by certain ICPs, I can structure the deals differently. If someone is really price sensitive, and maybe I lead with the trial offer. You know, so you can, what Ben's saying is the ICP leads into the messaging, and the messaging can lead into what you're actually trying to get them to convert on. It's not always you're trying to get them to buy, you know, $1 million package. It may just be, I want them to sign up for the trial. And so thinking through the ICPs and associated kind of offers or asks that you're going to go for, I think is a smart way to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the benefits is, and I think we'll touch on that a little bit later in the presentation, but you also create like fear of missing out. You know, like if you mention like competitors, or if you mention other people in their segments that are using it and benefiting from your product, then you create that like kind of like FOMO, and that's a really, really powerful sales technique. And people are more likely to respond and start engaging with you if you do that. Cool. So once you have your micro segments, obviously it's really, really important to reiterate it. You know, the market is going to change over time. It's going to be, you have more competitors changing, or the dynamics of the market is going to change. So always want to reiterate on your micro segments. And you may want to brainstorm, lookalike micro segments. So in the example from before, if you target people that use Stripe and their marketplace, well, look at like Stripe competitors, like maybe like BigCommerce or the big like platform like this. Are you able to target them? Can you have a messaging or maybe like a value prop for people that use that, identify their pain points, and then maybe it's a really attractive market for you to go after. So this is just a very basic screenshot, but like this is some of the audiences that we use here at Grow Labs. Oops. Are you guys still able to see my screen? Matt,
yeah.
Okay,
We're
sorry.
Good. We're good. Hey Ben, will you go back a slide?
Yep.
So I think there's a one point here. I love the idea of lookalikes. If you know anything about Facebook advertising, lookalikes are huge in terms of their Facebook's kind of pitch is, hey, we can build these lookalike audiences based off of your best kind of performing cohorts, right? And so thinking of that, like the salespeople now need to be more like marketers, right? So who are your top 5 clients, and how do you build decent sized lists that look exactly like your best customers? That's a huge power move that most people don't do. I actually just experienced this with one of my accounts where it was so obvious that this was a good account. I should have been going after them from day one, but I didn't think through my ICP or my micro segments enough, and I missed this prospect who's now a client for months upon months. I think that's really big. And then also, just to kind of reiterate once again, you can never have a tight enough micro segment, meaning your ICP is never too niche. If you think it's maybe it's a little too broad, you need to niche it exponentially. I think Ben is really talking through this well, but I think the if you can go and you can have 5 micro segments and the total list size of each of those is 100, now you've gone from mass blasting a list to actually doing more like account-based selling, which is where everything is moving to. So really getting super granular on your micro segments, and then also really thinking through the kind of lookalikes, I think are huge moves that you can do on the front end of your sales process that will have ROI at the end of the process.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And these are actually on the next slide examples of some of the micro segments that we use internally. And you can see we don't just target SaaS. Like we have a micro segments for like SaaS that are based in the US that have under 50 employees. And we have actually different micro segments for the C-level executive, like the CEO, the founders, the CMO, than we do for like the SVP of sales, because like the pain points, the messaging, all that kind of stuff is going to be different. So again, you want to split it into those micro segments so you can have messaging that might be different for all of them. Cool. So hopefully that was useful on the micro segments. So now that we looked at how you can split your target audience into those micro segments, let's look at how you can establish channels to acquire qualified leads in each of these markets. And I often get the question, about which channel should I be using first? Like, should I be using inbound versus outbound? Should we be using email versus ad versus conferences? Should we do like influencer campaigns and so on? And to be honest, the answer is probably all of the above. Like each channel has pros and cons. I'm obviously biased towards like outbound, just because I've seen it work extremely well. At my previous company, Universe, about 80% of our leads came from outbound. Here at GrowLabs, about 65% of our leads come from outbound. But you want to evaluate all of the channels, because depending on who you sell to, what's your business model, how is your sales cycle set up, you want to figure like what is the strategy, what are the roadblocks, what is the time to market, how is it going to scale over time, and obviously what's the ROI, what's the cost of acquiring these leads. So all of this is really important. So I kind of blurred that, like this was kind of like an internal analysis that we did. But for your own business, you kind of want to sit down and figure out which are the channels, how you want to prioritize them accordingly to your market. So taking the example of outbound email campaigns, obviously which is our primary channel here, for each of our micro segments, what you want to do is you want to obviously find companies that match your ICP. Then you want to find the decision makers at these companies. You want to blacklist, obviously, people you've already engaged. So people that are in your CRM that you already have existing conversation, and I see that happening all the time. People don't check their CRMs, or when they start scaling up, they don't have a really good source of ways to blacklist people they're already engaged with, and you don't want one of your sales reps to engage one of your existing clients with a very canned message that's not going to lead to good things. And then the next thing you want to do is you want to decide the maximum number of contacts you want to engage at each company at once. And when you do outbound and your ABM strategy, it's good to engage multiple people. Unless you're targeting very, very small businesses, maybe if they have less than 10 employees, you only want to target one. But for most companies, you want to start with like 2, 3, or 4 contacts at the same company, and then do that ABM strategy. And then you want to decide who will be reaching out to these prospects. Again, depending on your market and how you sell, typically it's an SDR or an ISR. It could be an AE as well, depending on the size of the account and how you sell.
So I think one point interesting here is being so organized. Obviously you can see Ben's background is a consultant, like coming through in his work here and the way he thinks. Most sales guys are not this organized, as we all know, and really thinking through these strategies that we're implementing on day one to build our list, to build our micro segments, that flows into everything like we're saying, but also into the CRM. I should be able to go into my CRM and I should have things organized enough where I can sort by my micro segment. I can pull the micro segment and then the VP of sales within my micro segments, right? So all these things of really planning and thinking through this stuff on the front end and organizing on the front end, getting the CRM and the list and everything organized before you start prospecting is going to make you much more powerful once you've established the play and you're ready and you're in the game and things have really started. So I just want to give Ben some kudos with how he's thinking through this stuff. And then most salespeople don't think through this stuff enough. And so how is your CRM going to be organized, mapping this all out, digging into your CRM and making sure that everything that you're organizing on your plan here also spills in the CRM is going to be a huge time saver and hopefully drive results as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I would add to that is so there are a couple of things that I think people miss a lot when they set up their CRMs and integration with some of the software like Grow Labs. Is so what we do at Grow Labs, we actually push the audience. So what is the ICP that the leads come from, but also what is the sequence of emails that they got. And obviously that way you can really A/B test and you can have analysis on what are the audience, what are the ICPs actually really focus on. And then once you find those, you can really see, okay, what is the messaging that works best for these ICPs, and you want to iterate on that a lot because your conversion rate is really going to depend on one, who you reach out to, and two, what is the messaging that you the messaging you use for each of these micro segments. Cool. So this is just an example of ICP from the audience I showed earlier. So as you can see, each segment, they have a specific set of criteria. So here we have obviously the location, the industry, the company size, the funding. Matt mentioned earlier, one interesting thing that you can do is track technologies, which is very, very powerful. Here at Grow Labs, we track about 20,000 technologies. So you can see people who are already using Stripe, people who are already using Salesforce. And again, you can use that into your messaging to make it more relevant to them. And so finally, once you have each of your micro segments and you can target them, what you want to do is you want to draft a series of outbound emails. Obviously, you're going to want to A/B test both the timing of the emails as well as the A/B test the content of each email. Same thing, very organized. Just an example of some of our sequence. But here you can see a screenshot taken from our platform. Each micro segment has its own series of emails and really allows you, again, to customize the messaging. You can use merge tags, well, you should be using merge tags and use specific languages that really resonate with each of these segments. All right, so this is a series, and I get this question all the time, how do I start with outbound email campaigns? What are the sort of messaging? How many emails do we need? So what I would recommend is to have an outbound email campaign that typically contains between 5 to 8 emails. Because it does take that many emails to follow up using outbound. These emails will be sent over the course of maybe 2 months, 2.5 months. So it may sound a lot when you start drafting them, but actually people on vacation, there's out of offices, people are really, really busy. And so some of these emails are actually very, very short, just pinging people. And some of them are more content driven. So these are some of the content that we recommend. And I'll stop here for a couple of minutes for you guys to digest a little bit. I turn to Matt to see if there's any questions. But basically, these are the type of emails and follow up. Some are, as I mentioned, super tiny, a couple of lines. Some are a bit longer to really build credibility, create fear of missing out, push a little bit of content like case studies. But what you really, really want to do for these emails is they should feel like they're coming from one of your sales reps. They should feel genuine. They should feel customized, and try to avoid putting a lot of images, a lot of things that your reps wouldn't do themselves. You really want them to be seen that it's a message that was drafted for them.
Yeah, and I would just add, thinking of multi-channel, multi-threaded. That's a big kind of buzzwords in the sales hacker community right now. Multi-channel meaning email, social, cold call, right? That's using multiple channels to break in the prospect. Multi-threaded is multiple different touch points within the account, so VP of sales, CEO, etc. So you basically have several people on your team emailing several people or contacting several people on their team, and you're using multiple different channels, right? So that's Ben's really focused on email, which is great, but to continue to get those conversion rates up, you want to touch them on LinkedIn, touch them other places, and then have emails coming right from your CEO, have emails also coming from the sales rep, using multiple different people within your company, emailing multiple people within their company, or connecting with multiple people in their company is a powerful strategy for sure.
Matt, do we have any question to answer now, or should we keep moving?
Yeah, no, we're good, Ben. Keep going.
All right, cool. So we'll keep moving along. Feel free to ask questions again. You can use the right panel if you have questions, and we'll answer them at the end of this. So all right, so now that you have your channels, now that you have channels to that you have identified, how to target those leads, move them. Next, what we'll focus on is how to effectively moving down your sales funnel. And in this section, we look at some of the steps in the funnel. Obviously, depending on your business and your targeting, these steps will be a little slightly different. This is typically for like a B2B business targeting, SaaS technology businesses. If you have a do-it-yourself platform, you may not have the need for like demos. You may not do negotiations. If you're selling, up market into Fortune 500, you may have a really, really long sales cycles involving multiple decision makers. So this approach is really kind of like the middle tier, but obviously you want to refine your strategy for your own sales organization. So typically, when you reach out to leads in different micro segments, it's good to have dedicated, MLPs or marketing landing pages for each segment. In the same way that you should customize the email messaging, you should customize the messaging that they see when they land on your website. So using different landing pages, different messaging for that is very, very important. This is an example I took from Square. So if you go on Square website, you can see a lot of the different ICPs that they target. And they actually drill down and have very, very specific landing pages with content, with credibility, with logos that are relevant for each segment. So here you can see one on the bottom left for like restaurants. Again, very, very customized for, if you're a restaurant owner, they really put themselves in the shoes of restaurant owner, and what would create like the fear of missing out, or that credibility that they be like, oh, okay, they've served 10 million meals that were sold through Square. Or, like a spa, like, hey, here are like the spa that we've sold to Square, here are like the spa organization that we work with. Again, very, very targeted. And the only way to do that is by, again, creating a customized segmentation strategy from the beginning.
Yeah, and I just, to jump in there, I think this goes back to a huge point of all this. With Ben being so organized and the way he thinks through this stuff. Most people on the webinar will not create sales pages, like especially if you're a smaller company, you're a startup. If you're Salesforce or something, it's a totally different beast. But if you're a startup, you're in a 10-person company, you're just trying to break into the market, you probably aren't going to spend the time to create those landing pages, to do these micro segments. But if you do that, you're going to be so far ahead of your competitors who are also startups who aren't going to take the time to do this. So yeah, I mean, that's an amazing thing. And that's something I think about where I'm like, if you spend the time to create those landing pages now, you're going to benefit from the next year of your prospecting. So it is worth it. There's really simple tools to do that. So I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page there. A few questions, Ben.
Yep.
So one is just about, ratios. What ratios to look at that would help, optimizing our funnel. What I'll say, my own 2 cents on ratios is obviously like ratios, like response rates are a good ratio to look at. But I love there's some things that Aaron Ross from Predictable Revenues talked about in terms of it's not about response rates. It's about responses, meaning I don't care if you have a 100% response rate if you emailed one person. It's about getting the most amount of replies or qualified opportunities. So that's the way I would look at it. You can blast 10,000 people and get 100 responses, or you can do 100 handcrafted emails and get 100 responses. It's really thinking through how to get the responses to create the qualified opportunities, not as much on the ratios. And the caveat there would be think in terms of time, right? How long does it take you to generate those 100 qualified opportunities using a mass blast approach versus a kind of customized approach? Going off what Ben's talking about, if I spend this time creating these landing pages, doing these micro segments, getting my CRM organized correctly, getting the templates all dialed into the ICPs, that may take a ton of time on the front end, but once I start executing it, my qualified opportunities will go through the roof versus if I didn't invest the time to do this and I just blasted template emails out to anyone and their mom, then the issue would be I wouldn't be able to generate as many qualifier opportunities in the same amount of time, if that makes sense. So can you kind of touch on kind of ratios and response rates, Ben's, and
yeah, no, I mean, I think what you said is very true. It's not, you can track everything in the world and try to optimize, every step of the funnel, which I think is good. But like, yeah, at the end of the day, really try to think about, one is like, where are you right now? Like, what are your conversion rates for each funnel, like each step of the funnel, and like, where are people dropping off, obviously? Is it because you're not, you don't get opened because you're not reaching out to the right people? Do you not get responses because your messaging is not good? Or, are people dropping off after the demo? Are people dropping off when they're negotiating contracts? So there's a lot of like those things that you want to try to optimize and track over time. But as Matt said, it's really a lot about, hey, how many, I would say, not just responses, but how many conversions do you get and how much time is spent, on these. Because yeah, sure, you can spend a year trying to close 10 accounts, and if they're really big accounts and your target market is 25 accounts, you're doing a great job. But if you're trying to target 100,000 businesses, you need to find ways to make it scalable, and looking at those ratios over time and how to improve and how to see where people are dropping off is very important. And I'll touch base a little bit later in the presentation about some of our ratios. But very, very overall, I would say, from an open rate, if you don't get 50% open rate, you're doing something wrong. If you're not getting, 10 to 20% response rate, I think you're doing something wrong. And in terms of positive, like conversion from a cold outbound outreach into, a qualified demo, you should get into the 2 to 5% if you're doing something good. 1% if you're in a very, very, tough competitive space. These are like, very high level metric. It's going to be different for every businesses. But it's good to have those guidelines and see how you're doing today and how you're going to do as you scale and how you're doing when you refine your products and when the competition picks up as well. So, yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Cool. So one important aspect that you want to look at is, as part of optimizing your sales funnels and again your ratios, is you want to look at demos and how people book into your reps. That could be a big drop off. So one thing that we've started to use here at Grow Labs that's very efficient, we use Calendly, and we use setup like round robin. So when people go find your product, they can find a time that works for them. It sets them up on a demo with your reps. What's very important is you again optimize this flow. As you scale, you don't want to have your reps sitting there for 25 minutes waiting for someone to show up on the phone call. So you want to make sure you're proactive and make sure you have as little no-show as possible. So you want to make sure you have confirmation email sent, obviously a calendar invite added to their calendars. You want to make sure there's follow-up and reminders. And the more automated you can do that, and actually Calendly does that pretty well, the better. And that's going to save your reps a ton of time. Like our reps at Grow Labs do between 8 to 12 qualified demos every single day. And the reason why we're able to do that is because, well, first our software pass only qualified leads to them, but then we have all of these automation and all of these things to make sure things are like funneled down and they can really focus their time on those qualified leads.
So Ben, there's some questions about tools, and I think this is a very obviously common sales hacker question. What are your favorite tools, etc. So obviously you like Grow Labs. That makes sense. You like Calendly. Sales, you mentioned Salesforce, Pipedrive. Is there like a few tools that you like beyond your own that you want to mention?
Yeah, and I'm actually like on the next step. I'm actually mentioning another one called PandaDoc, which we use to send proposal negotiation. It integrates with Salesforce, and you can send proposal that way. I've heard good things about DocSend as well. There's a few of them. We use Intercom as well, but that's more on the inbound side. So for people showing up on our website, we engage them and can re-engage them that way. I've heard good things about Drift, but I've not personally used it. So there's a bunch of tools you want to do. Again, the goal is, I see a lot of people that are like tool obsessed. I think you want to optimize, you want to start using tools when you see pain points and when you can actually see like, oh, okay, people are dropping off because of this, or our reps are spending too much time because of that. So look at like, where are your reps spending time? Where are the people dropping off? And then look for solutions that are good for that. For us, on an outbound, we obviously use Grow Labs. From an inbound perspective, we retarget people using intercom. There's a bunch of good tools for like ad retargeting. So Matt, you mentioned different channels and strategies. So AdRoll is a really good tool for that to do retargeting. We're actually building integration with them right now. So there's a lot of different tools like that, but I wouldn't be tools obsessed. I think it's all about identifying the pain points and then fixing pain points with the right tools, but not the opposite. Cool. So yeah, so back on that, and Matt, feel free to interrupt again if there's any relevant questions. I just want to keep moving so we can get to the Q&A at the end. But yeah, so in terms of proposal negotiation, I just mentioned we use Panada. Again, you should have a system that is very easy. If you send a lot of proposals, if you negotiate, you don't want to have your reps to do manual work. So we like Panada. It integrates with our CRM. People can e-sign. What's interesting about it is integrated with Stripe as well. So you can have people put their credit card information or connect their bank account, and then you can basically write there on the contracts, get the money, and you don't have to chase people for that. So that has really improved some of our sales cycle and the length of collecting payments. Cool. And actually, so now we've touched kind of like on the flows and the tools to optimize those flows. The last step is how to measure, optimize, and scale. And that goes back to Matt, the question that you were asking earlier on. What are the ratios to track? So those are some that we track here internally. So obviously, like the number of opportunities created, in a certain period of time, the opportunities by statuses. So it's really important to map your CRM with the right status that makes sense for you and how you sell. And the stage duration is a very important one. Like how long does it take for people to move from one stage to another one? And you want to track that by source and by audience and by ICP. And that's very important because then you're going to be able to say like, okay, for this audience, on average, it takes us a month to close. But for that other ICP, it takes us 6 months. And then you can really look at like, okay, that ICP might be longer sales cycles, but it might be 100x the revenue. So then you can really do a really smart analysis and really figure out like where you should spend your money and when you should spend your time. One that I really like is the close loss reason. And that helps, refine your product to know what are people not using and what are the pain points that they want you to solve that you're not solving, or like maybe there's competitors that you're competing with and they're going to that. So like knowing that, very, very important to refine your product, refine your approach. Close one by source is really important. So when you're closing leads, where do they come from? Do they come from outbound? Do they come from webinar like today? Do they come from ads? Like knowing that is going to be able allow you to see your ROI by channel and focus on the right channels. And then, yeah, by contract value, by the contract length, obviously. The average time to close by source, again, very important as you scale your operation. That's a metric you definitely want to track. So in terms of our ratios, and we talked briefly about that, but what we do is we have that model where simple, sales funnel, we look at how many leads that we get per rep on average. So this is in the last 30 days. How many outbound leads do we get per rep? How many inbound leads? Where do the leads come from? How many convert into open opportunities into our CRM? How many have we engaged? And to me, engage is one of the most critical aspects because when they engage, we know that there's a 70% chance of them closing in the future. We close about 23% in the first 30 days, but we know that the rest will close in the next 3 months. So those ratios are very important for me to track and to know, as we scale, how do we maintain, how do we improve those ratios? And that's how we're also able to quantify the value that each rep brings. If we look at the engaged opportunity per month, now we can know that, per day, that's about 2.7 opportunities per day. With our average lifetime value, we're actually generating $35,000 of qualified ups per day per rep. And I think that's, a really good metric to track. And that resulted for us in $10 million of qualified pipeline generated across our company in the past 3 months. Right, so we've kind of touched on all of the aspects of our own framework and how we see our sales system and how we identify ICPs, reach out to them, and then move them down the funnels effectively. Obviously, what you want to do from there is build your own strategy, but you really want to start with those ICPs, and then from there be able to target them with the right messaging and move them down the funnel. Yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. I think we'll open the floor to questions. We'll answer a few of them now, and then if you have other questions, feel free to reach out to me and ben@growlabs.com. You can visit our website as well if you're a B2B company that needs more leads, that wants to optimize how they reach out to leads. We work with hundreds of B2B companies to have them do that. And yeah, Madam, I think I'm something we need to cover today.
I think it seems like obviously a lot of our audience is sales focused. So there's questions about cold calls. There's questions about even different types of outbound channels like SMS. I don't know. I mean, do you have anything you want to touch on in terms of cold calling or using SMS in your outbound approach?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's good to do multi-channels. Very, very good to do that. And we've tried, a lot of different channels. I think, number one, the most effective one is always emails if you do it in the right way. We've tried, we haven't tried SMS just because personally I feel like it's a little bit too intrusive. I do like the idea of cold calling, and I think it actually works really, really well. But I would say warm cold calling works even better. So if you pre-warm the account, you send them a few emails, maybe you do a bunch of retargeting ads to really warm up the email. That way when you reach out to them, it's not purely a cold call. I think that works really, really well. So if you combine, a cold outbound email strategy with some cold inside based on some triggers. So what we actually do is we set up some triggers that if we see that people open our emails but don't respond for a certain number of days, then we send tasks to our reps to cold call them. And again, it's not a pure cold call. It's more of a warm cold call because they're not expecting your call, but they've seen your company, they know your name, they know your brand already. So it's a much better conversion. It's a much better use of their time. And the last thing I would say about other channels, what is really good again is to do retargeting of ads. So obviously a lot of people spend money creating ads, using Google AdWords, Facebook AdWords. One very interesting strategy that we've seen is start with an outbound email campaigns. Again, identify your ICPs, which domains, which targets you're using, and then at the same time in parallel using ad retargeting. And now what you can do with new technologies, you can do targeting based on 100 domains, 100 companies, 100 emails that you're trying to target. And again, that pre-warms the account, and that's going to increase the conversion of your outbound sales. So that has been we've seen that being very effective.
Yeah, so there's some questions around basically responses and how you're tracking. I mean, and I think this is a common thing with a lot of these tools is that it'll just, if you're using an email automation tool, whatever tool you use, you're emailing someone, they respond, it's just going to have your overall response rate. And that's going to group in there no's, right? People are going to say not interested. It's going to tag that as a response, and you're going to inflate your data and say, wow, look, like people are responding like crazy when everyone's telling you to jump off a cliff. So yeah. I think, and I know you guys use some AI that factor in there. If you're using an email automation system that doesn't have the AI piece, which I don't think many do, you're going to have to tease out that data manually. You're going to have to go, look, I emailed 500 people. I had 50 responses. Of those 50, only 25 were actually positive. So some of these things, this is a caveat what Ben said about tools. Tools only go so far. You can see how much work Ben has done thinking through this just with pen and paper. So tease out your metrics to make sure you're reporting and thinking through the metrics in the right scope. Positive responses and negative responses should not be grouped together. You should understand how many positive responses you got from that outbound campaign, not overall responses.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, yeah, so I mean, at Grow Labs, we built it in-house. So, for our clients, we realized that, yeah, the rest were spending a lot of time, triaging all of these emails. And really what matters is being able to engage the people that responded positively. So we built an AI system to analyze all of the emails, triage them, and we only push the qualified ones, so people that expressed positive interest, to the sales reps so they can focus on those. And, my sales rep, they do 8 to 12 calls, like demos a day because of that, because they really can focus on that. But if you don't have that, you definitely want to be able to mark those, triage them, and you want to be able to see in your CRM, how much time people are spending on that, like what are the sources of that? And then once you get your qualified or like your positive responses, you also want to look by audience, by channel, which are the ones that are converting. Because sure, people can say like, I'll jump on a demo, and your sales reps can spend half an hour on a demo, but if 90% of these demos are not qualified and it's not the right leads, then you're just wasting your time. It's even worse than not getting responses. And so you really want to track that again, by source, by audience, all the way down to who are you closing as clients.
Well, one question is just kind of, and I've experienced this as well, with the way Salesforce is organized or other CRMs, you kind of have this bucket of data where you have just a ton of leads, and then you have your opportunities, and there's really not a nice place in the middle for like nurturing. Someone who is a hot lead, I guess, they're showing interest. Do you have any tips around how you're organizing kind of the leads versus kind of active opportunities that are in your funnel? Because there's obviously ways to tag it in Salesforce, but I would be curious to kind of hear how you have your tagging in terms of completely cold lead versus one that's a high priority lead that you're really passionate about nurturing versus a fully qualified opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do is we use two metrics. One is the stage, and two is the priority. So in terms of stage, we customize. We use Salesforce, but it's probably the same for Pipedrive or any other CRMs. You basically really want to customize the lead stages and the opportunity stages for your own business model. As you said, there's a ton of things that it may take 6 months to sell to someone. Maybe you have to involve like 3 to 5 decision makers. So really depending on how you sell and what are the different steps, you want to really sit down with your sales rep, sit down with your team, and figure out how to map that and really customize it. You can't have the default Salesforce or default pipeline stages. That's not going to work. Every business is different. The way you sell is going to be different. If you're doing do-it-yourself sales versus Fortune 500 sales, it's going to be totally different. So you want to customize the stages. That's number one. And number two, you want to prioritize your leads, because not every lead is going to bring the same amount of business. Not every lead, and that's that takes time. That takes a little bit more experience, and that's where the data becomes important. So being able to track who you're closing and where they came from, then it's going to be able for you to predict, okay, the leads actually come from that channel on average results in bigger sales, or the leads that have more employees or more funding convert into bigger deals. So that those things kind of may seem intuitive, but unless you again start with a segmentation strategy to have those in different buckets, then you're not really able to segment anything and prioritize anything. So by doing the micro segments and ICPs at the beginning, you're able to really funnel those, and so your sales reps can know like, okay, I have 50 top priority accounts that I know I need to get back to really, really urgently. Everything else, can wait or may not be as important. So these are really the two metrics that we have. So it's like stages across the leads and the opportunities, and then the priority. And the priority really is a metrics that is based on past results and where we see the biggest accounts coming from.
Okay, so there's obviously I think with any this type of webinar you get a lot of information. Why don't you give us 1 or 2 key takeaways that every rep should do right now after they get off the call. They don't go get a coffee, they don't go to the bathroom, they literally just sit down and spend 3-4 hours busting out a few main action items from this webinar. What would you say for your average rep who just watched the webinar? What should they do today to impact future results based off some of the information you gave?
That's a really good question. So what I would recommend is look at who you've closed in the past 30 days, download that information, look at their profile, go on their LinkedIn, find industries, trends, job titles that work really, really well, and think about what are the 100 other businesses that have similar criteria, split them into different segments, and then from there think about what is the best way to reach out to them. Is it an email campaign? Is it doing an ad? Is it cold calling them? Is it attending a conference? Really think about where you can target these people, and what are the best channels to engage them with, and really focus on that. Split them into as many micro segments as possible, again, like the old school, let's email everyone with the same messaging kind of approach doesn't work anymore. So you really want to look at who's converting, split them into micro segments, and then go find a way to go after them.
Okay, and so my takeaway would be, based off that, look, whatever email automation system you're using, obviously you need to be using one. If it's Grow Labs, that's awesome. If it's another one, that's okay too. But all those apps are going to have dynamic fields that allow you to obviously put in their company name, put in their first name. That's basic. They all have advanced features for basically custom snippets or custom content that you're going to be able to tag to these micro segments. So go in, spend a few hours playing around with your email automation app and learn how to import that custom content. So then when you're kind of creating these outbound campaigns into your lists, you know how to quickly kind of make a really customized message that, it's like your core message with your really customized, snippet or piece of text or whatever for that micro segment. There's a lot of really cool things you can do when you really get deep into the email automation apps and try to figure out what's the coolest customization you could use using all these kind of custom fields and the dynamic fields together. That would be like my takeaway, because I've done it before and I really invest the time to do it. The templates come out really pretty awesome. So that's my takeaway. And awesome, Ben. It was fun chatting with you, and hopefully we'll see you again soon on another Sales Hacker webinar. Everyone, you can get this webinar in Sales Hacker U. That's Sales Hacker /market. It will be up in a day or two, and it will be there free for lifetime access to this webinar. Please tell your friends. Thanks again for joining, and we'll see you soon. Bye.